Hey guys, what is going on? And today we are back with another week of box office, so let's get into it. Make sure to like, sub, comment now. As we know from last week, the box office was in the worst spot it's been in like years of me covering this box office scene. So this week was a big test into figuring out, is this a blip or is this like a continuous new thing? Last week, and Juliet did 85% and the famous 582K, and this week it did 90% and 736K. Now, that is still too low for Anne Juliet. It's better, it's a big increase, but the average ticket is still $99. For a show that large, even though it's recouped, it needs to continue to make good money, and this was not a good week of money. It's had two poor weeks. Now, I know a year ago, they did do 600K, 716K, so it's not like it's, like, fallen so heavily from last year, but I do think that, the fact that its average ticket is still so low is super concerning to me. I think I said that I don't think it was going to close because it had a decent summer, and I do think that, you know, it will make it into 2026, but I do think we're entering its twilight years, and it could close at the end of the year, but in order for that to happen, I do think it's going to have another huge decrease and stay that way, and I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to stay in the 7s and maybe the 6s, which, again, is still not good. I think that if they don't have at least 2 weeks consistently where they have an 8 in front of them in the next month or so, I'm going to be super concerned. I think they'll do well enough in Thanksgiving and during Christmas that they will manage to do well, but I'm not entirely sure that it's going to be here for much longer. And then Aladdin, which again I don't normally cover, but it fell so hard last week, went to 93% this week, compared to last week's 80%, and 784K to 1,096,850, which is a big improvement, but it's very weak for Aladdin considering what Aladdin does. Aladdin normally does 1.1, 1.2 at the lowest. They have done 1,096, 1,086, but it's not something that happens a lot. Like I said last week, Vista Social Club managed to get back up there, 88% last week, and 890K to 98%, and 1,134,117. Cabaret, with its closing notice, did much better, but still pretty poor, 67% to 90%, and 380K to 629K. Death Becomes Her, 92% last week, and 1,164,222 to 98%, and 1,362,050. Hadestown had a very significant decrease, 94% to 91%, and 737K to 648K, which is not at all good for Hadestown. But again, it's fallen into the 6s in the summer, in May, and yet it's still here. So I do not think it will close at the end of the year, unless, of course, it consistently has a 5 or a 4 in front of it, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, but I think it will have maybe a couple weeks of 6s and go back to 7s, and it's had a decent enough year and summer that I think it can take these hits. Hamilton made $3 million. This is one of its biggest weeks in, I think, years, or maybe not years, but of 2025, with Leslie Odom Jr. returning. Hell's Kitchen, 64%, and 624K to 86%, and 907K. And so, like I predicted, Hell's Kitchen, it was more of a blip than a more overall consistent thing, because again, they've been doing poorly since 4th of July, but since then they've been managing to do steady at the 8s and the 9s, and so last week definitely seemed like an irregularity than a regular occurrence. Just in Time sells out 1,217,060 to 1,287,171. Maybe Happy Ending, 95%, and 234,748 to 98%, and 1,216,108. Once again showing that the controversy meant nothing. Moulin Rouge had one of its best weeks yet, but that's not saying much. 86% and 857K to 97%, and 1,041,832. Mincemeat, 82% and 556K to 97% and 683K. And again, I do think it's showing that it should close in February. 6, 54% to 81%, and 408K to 500 to 628K. I do think we are entering the final year of 6. You know, it's had a pretty mixed year. Could it close at the end of the year? Yes, if it continues down the paths of under 600K, but if it can manage to stay above 600K or at the lowest 600K, I think it can make it to the end of the year. But again, they don't have the great summer box office to lean off of because they had such a weak summer box office. So definitely a show that's in trouble. Stranger Things, 64% to 71%, and 598K to 803K. Definitely should close it in when the show ends in a couple months. Great Gatsby, 58% to 85%, and 623K to 895K, which is a lot better, but still quite low for Great Gatsby, but I think it will be fine. And then The Outsiders, 81% to 95%, and 750K to 1,244,000, which is pretty weak grosses, but I will say that the tour is starting. Brody Grant is no longer with the show, so that is making an impact. It's been here for over a year and a half now, so it is kind of typical to see bigger shows or newer shows that won Best Musical start to soften out this late into the run. So this is actually pretty normal for The Outsiders. And even if it has a 9 or an 8 in front of it, I think it's fine, but I do think that anything below 850K is not doing great. So that's the box office. Let me know what you think. I do think we still have a lot of shows that are on ice and some that could close at the end of the year. I'm almost certain of it. So like, sub, comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.